Ma'am, this fake boarding pass isn't going to fly with us today. The words slice through Sky Global Airlines' gleaming terminal as Derek Foster, the smirking gate agent, holds up a first-class boarding pass theatrically. Dr. Amara Collins stands frozen at the counter, her hands resting calmly on the polished surface while her knuckles turn white. Derek waves the boarding pass high enough for every passenger to see, drawing snickers from his colleague Vanessa and prompting Security Officer Martin to step closer, hand moving toward his radio. Then Derek does the unthinkable. He tears the boarding pass in half with deliberate slowness, the sharp ripping sound echoing through the gate area as torn pieces flutter to the counter like wounded birds. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Other passengers turn to stare, while whispers ripple through the terminal, their eyes fixed on the black woman now surrounded by judgment and suspicion. Have you ever been so publicly humiliated that your entire body went numb, yet your mind became laser-sharp with purpose? The digital display glows 3:47 p.m. 43 minutes, until Sky Global Flight 857 departs for London, but Derek Foster acts like he has all the time in the world. He examines the torn boarding pass pieces with theatrical disgust, holding them high enough for every passenger in line to witness his performance. Executive Platinum member since 2020, his voice booms across the gate area. Lady, I've never seen the status level before, and trust me, I know every legitimate tier in our rewards program. Customer Service Director Meredith Wilson materializes from her glass office like a shark sensing blood, her heels clicking with predatory precision. She doesn't examine the evidence before choosing sides. What's the situation, Derek? Meredith asks, though her crossed arms and dismissive glance at Amara telegraph her predetermined conclusion. Behind them, Mrs. Patel discreetly angles her phone to capture the unfolding discrimination, her live stream silently gathering witnesses. 3 forms of ID, physical passport, and printed itinerary with confirmation number. Meredith demands, each requirement dropping like a gate slamming shut. Amara reaches into her Birkin handbag, worth more than Derek's monthly salary, and produces perfect documentation. Meredith examines each piece with exaggerated suspicion, turning them toward the light as if hoping to find obvious forgeries. These look sophisticated, she announces loudly. Scammers are getting better at fake IDs these days. The accusation lands like a slap. Mrs. Patel's viewer count jumps to 42, then 78. Comments flood in. This is racism in real time. And someone tag Sky Global Corporate. The hashtag Sky Global Shame begins its viral climb while Amara maintains supernatural calm, checking her Cartier watch. Another wealth signal everyone's choosing to ignore. Security Officer Martin positions himself behind Amara with military precision, his presence shifting the room's energy from uncomfortable to threatening. His radio crackles as he adjusts volume, the static making nearby passengers flinch. Young Father Jason instinctively pulls his sons closer, their innocent eyes absorbing a masterclass in institutional prejudice. They're too young to understand, but old enough to remember. First-class boarding pass fraud is classic. Derek lectures Meredith while gesturing at Amara like she's an exhibit. They come in right before boarding, hoping we won't have time for proper verification. Textbook scammer behavior. He tears another corner from the already destroyed boarding pass, his destruction complete, but his humiliation just beginning. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The clock reads 3:50 p.m. Amara's phone buzzes. Executive board meeting reminder, 8 p.m. London time. She silences it without reading, but not before Meredith notices the expensive device and corporate calendar notification. A United Nations diplomatic pass edges from her blazer pocket. Another clue hiding in plain sight. Corporate security needs to verify this, Meredith announces, dialing with theatrical urgency. Yes, this is Gate Supervisor Meredith Wilson. We have a potential fraud situation involving a suspected counterfeit first-class boarding pass from an unknown rewards tier. Her voice carries across the gate area, turning Amara's private travel into public spectacle. The live stream explodes to 124 viewers. Mrs. Patel provides running commentary. Professional black woman being criminalized at Sky Global's international terminal. They destroyed her boarding pass and called her a scammer. Local aviation lawyer James Richardson joins from his office, immediately recognizing systematic discrimination patterns he's fought for decades. Derek produces a laminated fraud prevention chart, pointing at various security features while building his case. See these watermarks? Too perfect, obviously computer-generated. Real executive platinum passes have slight variations that prove authenticity. His confidence grows with each fabrication, feeding off Meredith's encouraging nods and the audience's uncomfortable silence. Mr. Garrison, elderly and impatient, mutters, "Some people." While checking his watch, the phrase, hanging loaded with meaning, letting him express prejudice through coded language. Jason whispers to his twin sons to stay close, his paternal instincts recognizing danger even if he can't articulate its source. Meredith's corporate call stretches deliberately long. Through the speakerphone, Amara hears keyboards clicking as her information gets flagged in security databases. "We're running full background verification," Meredith announces unnecessarily loudly. These sophisticated fraud rings require thorough investigation. Martin's radio crackles with new instructions. He nods grimly and steps closer to Amara, invading her personal space with practiced intimidation. "Ma'am, I need you to step aside for private discussion," he suggests with authority that transforms requests into commands. His hand rests on his equipment belt, a subtle threat that doesn't go unnoticed. The viewer count hits 167. Comments stream faster than Mrs. Patel can read. "Call Sky Global Headquarters, now W, and this airline is finished, and someone get this woman, an aviation attorney." The digital outrage builds momentum while Amara stands in the eye of the storm, checking her watch again. 3:53 p.m., 37 minutes until departure. Meredith hangs up her performance call with satisfied finality. "Corporate security has placed you on our fraud alert list pending investigation. We cannot allow you to board until verification completes, which typically takes 24 to 48 business hours." She delivers this news with bureaucratic satisfaction, watching for Amara's reaction to institutional defeat. But Amara doesn't break. Instead, she does something unexpected. She smiles, not with humor or submission, but with the quiet confidence of someone who knows something everyone else has missed. Her fingers drum once against the counter, a subtle rhythm that suggests patience rather than nervousness. "Interesting timing," Amara says softly, her first words since the humiliation began. Her voice carries undertones of steel wrapped in silk, calm authority that makes Meredith's aggression seem suddenly juvenile. She glances at the promotional video playing on the gate's television screen, then back at Meredith with that same mysterious smile. The clock shows 3:54 p.m., and something has shifted in the room's power dynamic, though nobody can identify exactly what. Meredith's confidence cracks slightly at Amara's mysterious smile, but she doubles down with institutional authority. Corporate security requires full verification before allowing any suspected fraudulent boarding, regardless of how sophisticated the attempt appears. Mrs. Patel's livestream viewer count explodes past 350 as the story spreads through digital networks. Comments flood in faster than she can read them, transforming private humiliation into public accountability. Local news aviation correspondent Tyler Chen races to the terminal after receiving multiple tips, his crew cutting through security while the discrimination unfolds in real time. Derek calls his regional supervisor, speaking with theatrical authority. "We've intercepted a major fraud attempt involving a fake first-class boarding pass for London. The suspect claims executive platinum status, but we've never heard of that tier." He pauses dramatically, stealing glances at Amara while expecting to see panic. Instead, her calm demeanor seems almost amused, which only strengthens his determination to expose her supposed crimes. The airline's crisis management team receives alerts as social media monitoring systems detect unusual activity. Digital marketing manager Sofia Lopez types urgent messages in corporate Slack channels. Developing discrimination incident at international terminal. Live stream going viral. Need immediate damage control. Corporate headquarters 12 miles away begins mobilizing response protocols for what could become a public relations disaster. Martin positions himself more aggressively, using his security training to control Amara's movement options. Additional identification required, he demands while blocking her path to the seating area. His tactical positioning transforms the gate area into an interrogation zone, with Amara surrounded by hostile staff and increasingly uncomfortable passengers. Other travelers express growing impatience with barely concealed prejudice. Mr. Garrison checks his expensive watch and sighs dramatically. Some people always create problems at boarding time, he mutters loud enough for everyone to hear. Young Jason pulls his twin sons closer, their innocent eyes absorbing a masterclass in discrimination they're too young to understand, but old enough to internalize. 3:56 p.m. Meredith escalates by threatening law enforcement involvement. Attempted airline fraud is a federal offense, she declares while reaching for her desk phone. I'm calling airport police to ensure proper procedure is followed. Her threat hangs like a weapon designed to force Amara into confession or flight. The remaining passengers shift uncomfortably, some distancing themselves from what they perceive as criminal activity. But Amara doesn't break. She calmly checks her phone, not frantically like someone caught in deception, but methodically like someone confirming expected information. Her movements reveal expensive accessories, platinum corporate credit cards, diplomatic credentials, first-class lounge access cards. These status symbols remain invisible to staff committed to seeing only criminal behavior. The live stream reaches 475 viewers as Mrs. Patel provides real-time commentary. They're threatening police against this professional woman for flying while black, she whispers urgently. Sky Global International Terminal. Gate Supervisor Meredith Wilson, Agent Derek Foster. Her documentation transforms passive viewers into potential activists, several already researching corporate contact information for complaint filing. Derek discovers new reasons for suspicion through amateur investigation. This passport hologram appears altered. He announces with growing confidence, corporate ID uses non-standard formatting that suggests forgery. His forensic theater impresses Meredith, who nods approvingly at his thoroughness. Neither realizes they're critiquing legitimate government and corporate documents with actual security features. 3:57 p.m. Corporate security demands direct customer contact. They want to speak with her personally, Meredith announces with bureaucratic satisfaction. Standard fraud investigation protocol. She extends her desk phone like a challenge, expecting confusion from someone caught in criminal deception. Amara accepts the phone with unchanged composure. Dr. Amara Collins, member identification EP 47291, executive platinum holder since 2020, she states clearly. Her response includes specific details that surprise Meredith, real verification codes, and security answers that suggest legitimate travel history rather than attempted fraud. The corporate conversation continues with Amara providing additional authentication information with precise accuracy. Security's tone shifts from suspicious interrogation to professional courtesy as they access her actual account records. Thank you, Dr. Collins. Your verification is complete. The voice concludes professionally. Meredith's confidence wavers at this unexpected development, but Derek maintains his fraud conviction. Sophisticated criminals research their targets thoroughly. He explains to anyone listening. They gather real information to support elaborate deceptions. That's what makes them so dangerous to detect. His expertise by assertion convinces himself even as contradictory evidence accumulates. The wall-mounted television cycles through Sky Global's promotional content featuring diversity campaigns that directly contradict the discrimination occurring below. Sky Global Airlines' Everyone's Journey Matters scrolls across the screen while staff criminalize their black passenger. The corporate hypocrisy isn't lost on live-stream viewers, whose outrage intensifies with each ironic advertisement. Jason's sons ask uncomfortable questions in loud whispers. Why is the nice lady in trouble? And what did she do wrong? Their innocent curiosity forces Jason to confront the racism his children are witnessing, though he struggles with age-appropriate explanations for institutional prejudice they're absorbing in real time. 3:58 p.m. Martin produces official documentation requirements. Incident report completion is mandatory for suspected fraudulent activity. He announces while brandishing clipboard and pen. His law enforcement background shows in question framing designed to elicit incriminating responses from suspects under pressure. Amara's answers confound his expectations completely. Occupation: Chief Diplomatic Officer, United Nations Sustainable Aviation Council. traveling for executive board meeting in London. Her professional vocabulary and unshakable confidence suggest someone comfortable navigating international diplomacy rather than improvising criminal schemes under interrogation pressure. The live stream viewer count crosses 600 as shares multiply across social platforms. Digital accountability arrives in real time, transforming private humiliation into public scrutiny that demands immediate corporate response. Sky Global CEO Richard Bennett receives emergency alerts during a charity fundraiser at an exclusive country club. His assistant texting urgently, discrimination crisis developing at international terminal. Viral live stream. Need immediate intervention. A passenger rights advocate, Marcus Johnson, arrives outside the gate area, documenting the scene through windows while live updating his substantial social media following. His presence signals that this incident has attracted organized civil rights attention, elevating stakes beyond simple customer service failure into potential legal action territory. 3:59 p.m. Meredith's desk phone rings with incoming calls from corporate headquarters, regional management, and crisis communications teams. The discrimination she initiated as routine customer intimidation has mushroomed into institutional emergency requiring executive-level damage control. Her face pales as she recognizes the magnitude of her miscalculation. Derek continues defending his fraud theory even as evidence mounts against it. Elaborate schemes often include real diplomatic credentials. He insists to Meredith while other staff members begin questioning his judgment. His commitment to being right overshadows mounting proof that he's catastrophically wrong about both the boarding pass and the passenger. Amara checks her watch one final time, her mysterious smile now containing unmistakable anticipation. The countdown that began as institutional pressure against her has transformed into something working entirely in her favor. Every second brings her closer to a revelation that will reverse the power dynamic completely. The promotional video on the wall television begins a new cycle, and Amara's attention shifts toward the screen with knowing expectation. Her calm confidence suggests someone waiting for a precisely timed event, rather than hoping for rescue from desperate circumstances. 1 minute until boarding. 1 minute until everything changes. 4 p.m. Sky Global Airlines. Final boarding call arrives with the finality of a judge's gavel, but nobody moves toward the gate. The discrimination has reached its crescendo, with Dr. Amara Collins standing calm at the center of institutional prejudice about to explode in ways her accusers cannot fathom. Amara pulls out her phone with the deliberate precision of someone who has been waiting for this exact moment. Her fingers move with diplomatic efficiency as she dials a single number. 1 ring, 2 rings, then a crisp, professional voice answers. "Claire, this is Amara." Her words carry across the terminal with crystal clarity, each syllable designed for maximum impact. Execute Protocol Delta. Yes, right now. Full implementation. She pauses, listening to the response while maintaining eye contact with Meredith. Confirmed. All systems go. The call ends with a soft click that somehow sounds louder than Derek's earlier boarding pass tearing theatrics. Amara turns toward the security camera mounted above Meredith's workstation. Her movement fluid and purposeful. When she speaks, her voice projects with the authority of someone accustomed to diplomatic negotiations. For the record, I am Dr. Amara Collins, Chief Diplomatic Officer of the United Nations Sustainable Aviation Council. Today is September 20th, 2025, and I am documenting systematic discrimination at Sky Global Airlines, International Terminal for Diplomatic Review and Legal Proceedings. Meredith's face begins its transformation from bureaucratic confidence to dawning horror. The diplomatic credentials Derek dismissed as fictional now carry weight that settles in her stomach like liquid concrete. United Nations Sustainable Aviation Council. She's heard that name recently somewhere critically important, but panic prevents the connection from crystallizing. Derek's fraud conviction wavers for the first time since the ordeal began. Real diplomats use private aviation, he insists, while clutching the torn boarding pass pieces with increasing desperation. Executive-level officials have diplomatic escorts. His amateur psychology cannot account for diplomats who prioritize commercial travel over private jets, especially when conducting business with airlines they're about to evaluate. Mrs. Patel's live stream has become appointment viewing for nearly 800 people, her real-time commentary transforming private humiliation into public accountability. "Something big is about to happen," she whispers to her phone. This woman has been too calm, too confident. She knows something they don't. The wall-mounted television completes its advertising cycle and flickers momentarily, drawing everyone's attention to what appears to be technical difficulties. But instead of returning to Sky Global's promotional content, the screen switches to breaking news coverage that will shatter every assumption in the room. Global News Network's anchor appears with urgent graphics blazing behind her professional composure. We interrupt regular programming with breaking aviation news. The United Nations Sustainable Aviation Council has completed its historic evaluation of global airlines, establishing new international standards that will transform the industry through a comprehensive rating system launching next month. The words hit the terminal like a physical force. Every conversation stops. Every breath catches. Every assumption crumbles as reality restructures itself around this new information. Meredith's hand freezes halfway to her desk phone while Derek stares at the screen with the expression of someone watching their world end in real time. The anchor continues with devastating precision. The evaluation, finalized just moments ago, will be overseen by the Council's Chief Diplomatic Officer, Dr. Amara Collins, who brings 2 decades of experience in international aviation policy and regulatory compliance to her new role. Derek's face transitions through shock, disbelief, and pure terror as the torn boarding pass fragments in his palm suddenly represent something far worse than evidence of suspected fraud. They now constitute documentation of his own discriminatory destruction of legitimate diplomatic credentials from his airline's ultimate regulator. A professional headshot appears on screen. The same confident expression, the same intelligent eyes, the same composed demeanor of the woman standing at their counter. Dr. Amara Collins, Chief Diplomatic Officer, smiling with the quiet authority of someone who has just acquired influence over their entire industry. "Holy Mother of God," Mr. Garrison whispers, his earlier prejudiced comments now echoing in his memory like evidence of character assassination. The elderly man who felt comfortable expressing casual racism suddenly faces consequences he never imagined possible. Meredith begins hyperventilating as the mathematical reality crashes over her. She hasn't just discriminated against a random passenger. She has publicly humiliated the executive responsible for her airline's international rating, her terminal's compliance certification, and her own continued employment. The institutional hierarchy she thought protected her prejudice has inverted completely. The news coverage provides additional context that deepens the horror. Dr. Collins was traveling on Sky Global today as part of the Council's final assessment phase, evaluating passenger experience and non-discriminatory service practices that will heavily influence each airline's global rating. The anchor's words transform Derek's fraud accusations into documented evidence of discrimination against legitimate diplomatic travel. Martin, the security officer, slowly backs away from Amara as understanding floods his consciousness. His tactical positioning and intimidation techniques have been directed against someone who now possesses regulatory authority over every aspect of his professional existence. Career suicide has rarely been so thoroughly documented. Jason's sons provide the only innocent commentary in the terminal. "Daddy, the nice lady is on TV," they exclaim with childish delight, their pure joy contrasting sharply with the adult panic spreading through the room like wildfire. Their father shushes them while processing the magnitude of witness discrimination against someone with real power to respond. The breaking news concludes with final devastating details. Implementation begins immediately with Dr. Collins conducting her first international committee meeting in London at 8 p.m. to establish new compliance standards and operational requirements for global carriers. The timing reveals that Amara's patience wasn't desperation, it was strategic precision allowing maximum documentation before wielding institutional authority. But the television isn't finished destroying careers. Sky Global's regular programming resumes with their newest advertising campaign, and the first face to appear sends shockwaves through anyone still capable of processing additional information. A confident woman with familiar bone structure and the same quiet strength radiating from her intelligent eyes. Her voice fills the terminal with painful irony. "Hi, I'm Elena Bennett. Sky Global Airlines helped my family build international connections through respectful, professional service that treats every passenger with dignity." Derek's remaining color drains completely as facial recognition connects wife and husband through shared features that should have been obvious from the beginning. The airline's own diversity campaign features the spouse of the CEO he's been criminalizing, creating layers of institutional hypocrisy that boggle the mind. Elena's testimonial continues with unconscious irony that burns like acid. My husband taught me that respect should be universal, and Sky Global understands that every passenger deserves professional treatment regardless of their background. Her recorded words indict the very discrimination Amara has endured while she unknowingly promoted their family values. The promotional video cycles through additional diversity messaging that now reads like evidence of corporate fraud. Sky Global Everyone's Journey Matters scrolls across the screen while staff members realize they've violated every principle their employer claims to uphold in front of the diplomat responsible for enforcing those standards globally. Mrs. Patel provides running commentary for her mushrooming audience. Y'all, they just discriminated against the woman who literally regulates their airline now, while the CEO's wife promotes their diversity on the same TV. This is the most epic comeuppance in aviation history. Her viewer count approaches 200 as shares multiply across social platforms. Meredith's desk phone erupts with incoming calls from corporate headquarters, regional management, and crisis communications teams. The discrimination she initiated as routine passenger intimidation has mushroomed into institutional emergency, requiring executive-level damage control that may no longer be possible. Amara finally breaks her strategic silence with words that carry the quiet authority of someone who has spent decades navigating diplomatic negotiations and international regulations. That boarding pass represented my final evaluation flight before submitting Sky Global's compliance rating to the United Nations Sustainable Aviation Council. Her explanation transforms their fraud accusations into evidence of bias against legitimate diplomatic travel. She continues with clinical precision that dissects their assumptions. I needed to complete this flight before our 8 o'clock committee meeting, where we finalized new international rating standards and compliance requirements. Her timing has been perfect throughout this ordeal, allowing complete documentation of systematic discrimination before revealing the power dynamic that makes accountability inevitable. Derek attempts desperate justification for his actions. How were we supposed to know who you were? His question reveals the fundamental flaw in discriminatory thinking that passengers must prove worthiness for basic respect, rather than receiving professional treatment automatically. Amara's response carries the measured tone of someone delivering international training. Professional service should be standard for every passenger regardless of perceived status or assumed credentials. Her words establish the foundation for regulatory changes that will flow from this documented discrimination. The promotional video returns to Elena's testimonial, her elegant face now carrying additional weight, as everyone understands the spousal connection. Sky Global believes in treating every person with dignity and respect, her voice explains, while Amara stands surrounded by the opposite treatment from staff who should embody those values. The clock shows 4:04 p.m. and the real confrontation is about to begin. The silence following Amara's revelation lasts exactly 9 seconds before Meredith's desk phone erupts with the fury of corporate crisis management. CEO Richard Bennett's number flashes urgently on the caller ID, followed immediately by 3 more lines lighting up simultaneously. Corporate headquarters, legal counsel, and crisis communications all demanding immediate answers. Meredith, what in God's name is happening at your terminal? Bennett's voice explodes through the speakerphone with barely controlled panic. I'm getting emergency calls from board members, the United Nations, and media relations. Tell me this viral live stream showing discrimination against Dr. Collins is some kind of elaborate misunderstanding. The speakerphone broadcasts his desperation to everyone in the terminal, eliminating any possibility of private damage control. Mrs. Patel adjusts her phone to capture the corporate meltdown unfolding in real time, her audience now exceeding 400 viewers, as the story achieves critical viral momentum across multiple social platforms. Amara steps forward with the measured precision of someone about to deliver a diplomatic briefing. Mr. Bennett, this is Dr. Collins. I can provide you with exact details of what transpired here today. Her voice carries the calm authority of someone accustomed to addressing international leadership during crisis situations. Sky Global Airlines International Terminal, 247 destinations, $14. $7 billion in annual revenue serving approximately 87 million passengers. She begins with the analytical precision that made her successful in diplomatic regulation. This specific terminal processes 700 international departures monthly, while employing 238 full-time staff members who apparently require immediate retraining in non-discriminatory passenger service. Bennett's voice cracks slightly as he processes the implications. Dr. Collins, I am profoundly sorry for whatever occurred. We had no idea you were conducting an evaluation at our terminal today. His apology reveals the corporate mindset that prioritizes important passengers over universal professional standards. That's precisely the problem, Amara responds with surgical precision. Professional service shouldn't depend on passenger identification or perceived importance. Every person who enters this terminal deserves dignity and respect, regardless of their appearance, background, or assumed status. She continues with data that transforms personal humiliation into regulatory liability analysis. Today's incident has been witnessed by over 400 live stream viewers and documented extensively through multiple recording devices. Conservative estimates place Sky Global's international rating penalty at approximately 27 points on the forthcoming compliance scale, potentially relegating your airline to Level 3 status. Meredith begins hyperventilating as the financial scope of her catastrophic error becomes quantifiable. Her discriminatory actions haven't just created human resources problems. They've generated massive regulatory liability that could impact the entire airline's international standing. Derek interrupts with desperate justification attempts. The boarding pass triggered our fraud prevention protocols. International first-class tickets require additional verification. His voice rises with each word as he grasps for institutional cover that no longer exists. Amara addresses him directly with the patience of someone explaining basic concepts to struggling students. The United Nations Sustainable Aviation Council completed its preliminary evaluation of Sky Global 6 months ago. Your non-discrimination training should have included recognizing legitimate diplomatic credentials, especially those involved in your own regulatory assessment process. She produces her phone and displays international documentation with the efficiency of someone who anticipated this exact conversation. Current Sky Global International Rating, 87/100ths. Potential rating after documented discrimination, 60/100ths. Level 3 status would restrict your landing rights at 17 major European airports and require additional compliance monitoring at significant cost to your operations. The regulatory reference sends visible tremors through Meredith's composure. International aviation agreements contain specific clauses about non-discriminatory practices that can trigger review processes, or in extreme cases, certification modifications that affect thousands of routes. Section 47.3 establishes zero tolerance for discriminatory practices during international evaluation periods, Amara explains with academic precision. Violations trigger immediate compliance review and potential restructuring of rating terms, including operational restrictions and mandatory monitoring protocols. Bennett's voice becomes increasingly desperate as he grasps the magnitude of institutional vulnerability. Dr. Collins, what can we do to address this situation appropriately? Sky Global is committed to making this right through any necessary corrective action. Amara checks her Cartier watch with deliberate theatricality, allowing tension to build before delivering her ultimatum. Mr. Bennett, you have two distinct options for resolution. Option A involves comprehensive institutional reform, including immediate policy implementation, mandatory bias training, and systematic monitoring protocols. She pauses for effect, while her audience, both physical and digital, absorbs the gravity of regulatory accountability in action. Option B involves the United Nations Sustainable Aviation Council recommending Level 3 restriction status for Sky Global that would effectively remove your competitive advantage in the transatlantic market, where 47% of your annual revenue originates. The threat lands with devastating precision. Walking away from regulatory compliance would cost Sky Global approximately $4.7 billion in annual revenue, significant but potentially survivable for a global carrier. However, it would cost Sky Global everything in terms of international prestige, market positioning, and shareholder value. 700 jobs, 247 routes, competitive landing slots at major international hubs, and institutional reputation. Amara calculates the potential losses with clinical detachment. All because your employee, she gestures toward Derek with diplomat's precision, couldn't treat a black woman with basic professional respect during a routine boarding process. The mathematical elegance of regulatory leverage becomes crystal clear. Amara possesses institutional power to transform personal discrimination into systematic change through economic pressure rather than emotional confrontation. Her strategic patience has created perfect conditions for accountability. Meredith attempts damage control through immediate scapegoating. Derek is suspended effective immediately, pending full investigation. She announces with bureaucratic efficiency. His actions don't represent Sky Global's values or training standards. Her speed in sacrificing her employee reveals institutional priorities focused on self-preservation rather than genuine reform. Personnel decisions are insufficient. Amara responds with the authority of someone who has restructured multiple international regulations. Systematic discrimination requires systematic solutions. Individual punishment addresses symptoms while ignoring institutional causes that enabled today's behavior. She outlines her requirements with the precision of someone delivering United Nations recommendations. Full diversity audit conducted by external consultants. Mandatory quarterly bias training with measurable accountability metrics. Real-time passenger service monitoring through digital feedback systems integrated with employee performance evaluations. The specificity of her demands reveals extensive experience with regulatory compliance management. These aren't emotional requests for justice. They're evidence-based interventions designed to prevent discriminatory behavior through structural modifications and technological monitoring. Bennett agrees to everything, with the enthusiasm of someone whose career depends on immediate compliance. Absolutely, Dr. Collins. Whatever resources you need for comprehensive reform, we'll implement every recommendation with full corporate support and unlimited budget allocation. But Amara isn't finished establishing accountability. Additionally, Sky Global will donate $5 million to international aviation accessibility programs as demonstration of commitment to global inclusivity. This contribution acknowledges that discrimination extends beyond individual incidents to affect entire communities through institutional bias. The financial penalty transforms personal discrimination into community investment, creating positive outcomes from discriminatory behavior while establishing precedent for future accountability measures. Mrs. Patel provides real-time commentary for her growing audience. Y'all, she's not just getting revenge. She's restructuring the entire airline to prevent this from happening to anyone else. This is how you turn discrimination into institutional change. Her live stream has become educational content about regulatory accountability in action. Jason explains the situation to his sons in age-appropriate terms. The nice lady is teaching the airline people how to treat everyone fairly, he whispers while pointing at Amara. Sometimes adults need to learn better manners, and she's helping them become nicer to all passengers. The promotional video begins another cycle, Elena's face returning to the screen with renewed impact. Her elegant confidence mirrors Amara's composure, creating visual irony that transforms corporate marketing into evidence of institutional hypocrisy, requiring immediate correction. Martin receives direct instructions through his earpiece to provide full cooperation and assistance to Dr. Collins. His supervisor's tone carries the urgency of someone trying to prevent additional discrimination documentation. The tactical positioning that began as intimidation now becomes protective escort service. Derek continues clutching the torn boarding pass pieces like talismans against professional destruction. But his amateur fraud investigation has preserved perfect evidence of discriminatory behavior. The paper fragments represent documentation of bias that will be referenced in sensitivity training sessions for years to come. The clock shows 4:07 p.m. as corporate crisis management accelerates. Legal teams receive emergency briefings while public relations specialists craft damage control strategies for discrimination that has already achieved viral status across multiple social media platforms. Amara observes the institutional panic with clinical detachment, her expressions suggesting someone conducting a case study rather than experiencing personal trauma. Her transformation from humiliated passenger to diplomatic regulator wielding institutional power is complete, but the systematic changes she's implementing will outlast this specific incident. I still need to reach London by 8 p.m., she announces with finality. I expect preliminary reform implementation plans in my inbox before we land to discuss Sky Global's future operational standards. The real work of institutional change is about to begin. 4:08 p.m. The corporate reckoning begins with the precision of a surgeon's blade. Security Officer Martin, the same man who blocked Amara's movement 15 minutes earlier, now stands behind Derek Foster with professional deference. Company protocol requires immediate removal of suspended personnel, Martin announces, his voice carrying none of the earlier intimidation. The irony tastes bitter in his mouth as he realizes he's escorting the colleague who dragged him into this disaster. Derek's hands shake as he stares at the torn boarding pass pieces scattered across the counter. His final paycheck calculation appears on Meredith's computer screen. $4,700. The exact number matching Mrs. Patel's live stream viewer count. A mathematical poetry that will haunt him forever. 27 years old, $47,000 in student loans, 27 seconds of footage that destroyed my career. He mutters, while security cameras document his exit past the same passengers he humiliated. Meredith Wilson's termination arrives via corporate phone call that echoes through the terminal speakers. Effective immediately, pending investigation into 17 months of documented complaints. CEO Bennett's voice announces with managerial finality. Her face crumbles as 17 years of employment disintegrate in 17 words, each syllable hammering home the cost of institutional prejudice. But the most devastating consequence isn't professional, it's personal. Meredith's college-bound daughter calls crying from her campus tour after classmates share the viral video. "Mom, everyone's saying you're racist," the girl sobs through the phone. "My campus tour group won't talk to me. The admission officers are looking at me differently. Why did you do that to that woman?" The generational damage of discrimination spreads like wildfire through social networks that don't forgive or forget. Dr. Collins observes the institutional collapse with clinical fascination rather than emotional satisfaction. Her expression suggests someone conducting a diplomatic case study rather than experiencing personal vindication. Systematic problems require systematic solutions, she explains to the trembling staff. Individual punishment addresses symptoms while ignoring institutional causes. The reforms begin immediately with surgical precision. External diversity consultants arrive within 30 minutes, their expertise funded by Sky Global's emergency budget allocation. Complete operational audit. Amara instructs with regulatory authority. Every policy, every procedure, every training manual gets reviewed and restructured around dignity-based passenger service. Mrs. Patel concludes her live stream with 700 viewers as the story achieves international news status. "You just witnessed the most epic comeuppance in aviation history," she tells her audience while filming the ongoing transformation. This woman didn't just get revenge. She restructured an entire airline to protect future passengers from this same discrimination. The Dignity and Respect Protocol becomes Sky Global policy within hours, establishing zero tolerance for discriminatory behavior with consequences tied directly to employment status. Real-time passenger service monitoring launches through digital feedback systems that detect bias patterns before they escalate into viral incidents. Technology-driven accountability, Dr. Collins explains, prevention rather than documentation. Mr. Garrison approaches Amara with genuine humility, his earlier prejudiced comments weighing heavily on his conscience. "Ma'am, I owe you an apology," the elderly man says quietly. "My words were wrong, and I'm ashamed of my behavior." His acknowledgement represents something deeper than individual accountability. It's recognition that discrimination requires community-wide responsibility. Jason uses the resolution as a teachable moment for his sons. "The nice lady helped everyone remember that all people deserve kindness." Quote, he explains while the twins nod with innocent understanding. Sometimes grown-ups forget their manners, but she reminded them how to treat everyone with respect. Global news correspondent Tyler Chen arrives for exclusive coverage as the story transitions from social media viral content to mainstream journalism. Dr. Collins has demonstrated that strategic intelligence defeats emotional reaction, he reports. Systematic change through regulatory leverage rather than individual confrontation. The promotional video playing on the wall television now carries transformed meaning. Elena Bennett's testimonial about Sky Global's respectful service has evolved from corporate marketing fiction into accountability measuring stick. Her elegant confidence provides ongoing reminder that discrimination damages families while professional service builds community trust. The financial accountability proves equally comprehensive. Sky Global's $5 million donation to international aviation accessibility programs establishes precedent for community repair following institutional discrimination. Bias affects entire communities through normalized prejudice, Dr. Collins explains. Global investment acknowledges systematic damage while funding prevention programs. The International Aviation Authority requests case study development based on the incident, recognizing Dr. Collins' approach's innovative model for regulatory accountability. The Collins method enters diplomatic vocabulary as shorthand for transforming discrimination into institutional reform through strategic documentation and systematic intervention. The torn boarding pass pieces become centerpiece of Sky Global's new sensitivity training program. Preserved under glass-like museum artifacts, they serve as visual reminder that individual bias creates institutional liability, while systematic respect builds corporate reputation and global trust. 4:27 p.m. Dr. Collins checks her Cartier watch before boarding the private corporate jet Sky Global has arranged for her London meeting. Her strategic patience has achieved something remarkable, converting personal humiliation into institutional protection for countless future passengers. The revolution began with torn paper and ends with structural change that will outlast everyone in this terminal. She reflects quietly. Justice served through intelligence rather than emotion. Power wielded through precision rather than anger. Change implemented through systematic reform rather than individual revenge. This is how discrimination dies. Not through shouting or litigation, but through strategic transformation that makes bias economically unsustainable. As her jet climbs through crystal blue skies, Amara reviews Sky Global's hastily drafted reform protocols on her tablet. Insufficient, she notes clinically in the margins. Requires additional accountability metrics and third-party verification. Her approach remains professional rather than punitive, focused on transformative change rather than corporate punishment. Elena Bennett calls as the aircraft reaches cruising altitude, her voice carrying the apologetic embarrassment of someone whose family values have been publicly contradicted by corporate culture. Dr. Collins, I cannot express how deeply sorry I am for what happened today. My testimonial was sincere. I truly believed we were building an airline where dignity was universal. Amara's response carries diplomatic precision that honors genuine contrition while maintaining accountability. Your values aren't the problem, Mrs. Bennett. The gap between corporate marketing and operational reality requires structural bridging, not personal apology. Her focus remains institutional rather than individual, transformative rather than punitive. I've dedicated my career to building compassionate corporations, Elena explains with quiet intensity. My husband and I both believe that ethical business practices create sustainable profitability, but clearly our values haven't permeated Sky Global's operational culture. Her sincerity suggests potential alliance rather than adversary in the coming transformation. Implementation defines values, not intention. Amara responds with the wisdom of someone who has studied institutional behavior across global systems. The most beautiful corporate mission statement means nothing without operational accountability that transforms values into measurable practices. Their conversation evolves from apology into strategic partnership, two professional women discovering shared commitment to institutional transformation that transcends personal experience. Would you consider joining our oversight committee? Elena asks with growing enthusiasm. We need your expertise to bridge this devastating gap between our values and our practices. Dr. Collins considers the invitation with diplomatic caution. Regulatory independence requires professional distance, she explains with United Nations precision. However, collaborative reform partnerships often achieve sustainable results beyond what external enforcement can accomplish alone. Their emerging collaboration demonstrates something powerful about transformative justice. When accountability focuses on systemic change rather than personal punishment, unexpected alliances can develop between those harmed and those responsible for institutional reform. We'll discuss potential partnership structures at tomorrow's committee meeting, Amara concludes, ever the strategic diplomat. Meanwhile, Sky Global's terminal undergoes rapid transformation that extends beyond superficial diversity displays into operational restructuring designed for lasting change. Passenger Service Director Thomas Reynolds arrives with crisis management authority that supersedes normal protocols. Complete operational reset, he announces to the remaining staff. Every procedure, every interaction, every system gets evaluated through dignity-based assessment. His swift arrival reveals something critical about authentic corporate transformation. Meaningful change requires immediate executive action that demonstrates unquestionable institutional commitment. Dr. Collins, Experience wasn't just a customer service failure. Thomas explains to his team. It was systematic breakdown that revealed fundamental flaws in our operational culture. But how were we supposed to know she was a diplomat? Asks Lisa, a younger gate agent who witnessed the discrimination without intervening. Her question reveals the persistent misunderstanding that continues perpetuating bias throughout institutional structures worldwide. That's precisely the problem, Thomas responds with newfound clarity. We shouldn't require special knowledge about someone's importance to treat them with basic human dignity. Every passenger deserves the same respectful service regardless of their perceived status. This fundamental realization, that dignity shouldn't depend on identity or position, begins spreading through Sky Global's corporate culture like healing medicine, transforming operational procedures from special treatment for important passengers into universal respect for every traveler, regardless of appearance or assumed status. Back on the private jet, Amaro reviews preliminary Sky Global compliance data that reveals something both disturbing and hopeful. Discrimination patterns concentrated in 5 specific terminals with similar management structures, she notes clinically. Suggests leadership contagion rather than company-wide cultural problem. This analytical precision demonstrates another dimension of effective institutional transformation. By identifying specific problem centers rather than assuming universal failure, strategic reform can target interventions where they'll create maximum impact while building on existing strengths throughout the organization. Diplomatic Officer Collins, the flight attendant announces with professional deference, CEO Bennett has requested a secure video conference to discuss preliminary reform implementation before your committee meeting. Richard Bennett appears on screen, his expression carrying the focused determination of someone whose professional redemption depends on demonstrating authentic commitment to institutional change. Dr. Collins, our team has completed initial assessment of discriminatory patterns throughout our global operation. His tone suggests executive accepting full accountability rather than corporate figurehead performing damage control. 17 specific operational modifications have been implemented within the past hour. Bennett continues with impressive efficiency. Every frontline employee has received emergency communication regarding non-discriminatory service standards with immediate accountability metrics tied to continued employment. Dr. Collins, expression reveals qualified approval of these swift actions while maintaining diplomatic reserve that communicates ongoing evaluation. Implementation speed demonstrates institutional commitment, she acknowledges professionally. However, sustainable transformation requires structural modification beyond emergency protocols. Their conversation reveals the complex dance between regulatory accountability and corporate reform, external pressure and internal transformation, punitive consequences, and rehabilitative opportunity. Bennett clearly understands that Sky Global's future depends not merely on avoiding punishment, but on becoming genuine leader in non-discriminatory service throughout global aviation. We've established immediate whistleblower protocols through secure digital reporting systems, Bennett explains with growing confidence. Any employee who witnesses potential discrimination can document incidents anonymously through blockchain-verified platforms that bypass normal management chains. This technological solution demonstrates an innovative approach to institutional accountability that leverages digital systems to overcome traditional hierarchical barriers that often suppress discrimination reporting within corporate structures. Technological accountability complements human intervention, Amara acknowledges with diplomatic precision. At Sky Global's corporate headquarters, crisis management transforms into opportunity assessment, as executive leadership recognizes potential competitive advantage in becoming industry leader for non-discriminatory passenger service. If we do this right, Strategic Director Jennifer Williams explains to her team, we convert regulatory crisis into market differentiation that attracts conscious consumers worldwide. This transformative perspective demonstrates how economic incentives can reinforce ethical practices when corporations recognize that inclusive service creates sustainable business advantage rather than compliance burden. Diversity becomes profitability driver rather than regulatory obligation. Jennifer continues with growing enthusiasm. Dr. Collins, intervention might become the most valuable free consulting our airline has ever received. Back at the international terminal, passenger experience undergoes immediate transformation as Operational Director Thomas Reynolds implements front-of-the-line verification protocols designed to prevent documentation challenges from escalating into discriminatory incidents. When identification questions arise, we escalate to specialized verification teams, rather than conducting amateur fraud investigation at public counters. He explains to his staff. This procedural modification addresses fundamental problem that transformed routine verification into public humiliation during Amara's experience. By moving sensitive documentation questions into private professional settings, the airline preserves passenger dignity while maintaining necessary security protocols through trained specialists. But will miss catching some fraudulent passengers, protests senior agent Caroline, revealing persistent institutional mindset that prioritizes fraud prevention over passenger dignity. Her concern demonstrates how deeply embedded discriminatory thinking becomes within operational cultures that measure success through prevention statistics rather than passenger experience metrics. "We're an airline, not a police force." Thomas responds with newfound clarity that reveals his own transformed understanding. "Our primary obligation is passenger service within reasonable security parameters, not criminal investigation at the expense of customer dignity. We've been optimizing for the wrong metrics." This philosophical shift demonstrates fundamental reorientation from security-centered operations to service-centered protocols that maintain necessary verification without sacrificing passenger respect. By rebalancing these competing priorities, Sky Global begins establishing new operational culture that measures success through customer experience rather than prevention statistics. Meanwhile, industry-wide transformation accelerates as competing airlines recognize regulatory implications of Sky Global's discrimination crisis. Emergency executive meetings convene throughout global aviation as leaders implement proactive reforms designed to prevent similar incidents within their own operations. "Collins just created worldwide change without writing a single regulation," notes American Airways CEO Diana Washington to her executive team. This ripple effect demonstrates how strategic intervention at critical pressure points can generate systematic transformation beyond immediate institutional boundaries. By leveraging regulatory authority against a single airline, Dr. Collins has initiated industry-wide reform that will protect countless passengers from similar discrimination across global aviation. As Dr. Collins' flight approaches London, the global impact of her strategic intervention becomes increasingly apparent. International aviation monitoring systems light up with unprecedented activity as airlines worldwide implement emergency non-discrimination protocols to avoid similar regulatory consequences. The Collins effect enters industry vocabulary, describing how a single, well-documented incident can trigger systematic transformation when leveraged through strategic regulatory pressure. At Heathrow's VIP terminal, United Nations Sustainable Aviation Council representatives await Amara's arrival, with tablets displaying real-time implementation data from global carriers. 17 major airlines have announced comprehensive bias training programs in the past 3 hours, reports Deputy Officer Marcus Chen. Sky Global's crisis has created reform momentum we couldn't achieve through years of traditional regulation. This cascading transformation demonstrates fundamental truth about institutional change. Strategic pressure applied at critical leverage points can generate systemic reform far beyond direct regulatory authority. By documenting a single discrimination incident within a high-profile carrier, Dr. Collins has initiated industry-wide accountability that traditional regulatory approaches couldn't achieve through conventional enforcement mechanisms. Our preliminary data suggests 87% compliance with non-discrimination standards among major international carriers, continues Chen with growing enthusiasm. However, regional airlines and smaller carriers show only 43% implementation rates, suggesting targeted intervention might be necessary within those market segments. This analytical precision reveals another dimension of effective regulatory strategy. By identifying specific market segments where compliance lags, the Council can direct limited resources toward areas requiring additional intervention rather than applying universal pressure across already compliant sectors. Strategic precision creates greater transformation than generalized enforcement. Meanwhile, Sky Global's international terminal undergoes physical transformation designed to embody new operational principles. Verification privacy stations replace open counter documentation checks, allowing discrete credential confirmation that preserves passenger dignity while maintaining necessary security protocols. These architectural modifications demonstrate how physical environments shape interaction patterns, either reinforcing or disrupting discriminatory tendencies within institutional settings. Environmental design influences behavioral outcomes, explains Professor Jamila Washington to Sky Global's executive team during emergency bias training. Your terminal architecture previously facilitated public scrutiny during verification processes. creating conditions where staff performed discrimination for audience validation rather than conducting private professional assessment. This insight about performance aspects of discrimination, how institutional environments can encourage staff to perform bias for peer approval, transforms Sky Global's understanding of discriminatory incidents from individual prejudice to systematic environmental factors that either encourage or discourage biased behavior through art. Back in London, Dr. Collins prepares for the committee meeting that will establish new international standards while reviewing Sky Global's hastily implemented reforms. Their emergency protocols demonstrate commitment to immediate change. She acknowledges to her team. However, sustainable transformation requires structural modification beyond cosmetic policy adjustment. Her analytical assessment reveals sophisticated understanding about institutional reform that distinguishes between emergency responses designed for damage control and systematic changes necessary for lasting transformation. This distinction between reactionary adjustment and fundamental restructuring defines effective regulatory intervention across global systems. At Sky Global's corporate headquarters, CEO Richard Bennett conducts comprehensive assessment of discriminatory patterns throughout global operations, discovering disturbing trends that reveal how leadership styles influence institutional culture. Terminal managers with military or law enforcement backgrounds show 270% higher discrimination complaint rates than those with hospitality or education backgrounds, notes Human Resources Director Michelle Park during executive briefing. This revelation transforms Sky Global's hiring philosophy from security-centered leadership to service-oriented management, prioritizing customer experience expertise over enforcement backgrounds that inadvertently create discriminatory operational cultures. We've been optimizing our leadership pipeline for the wrong qualities, acknowledges Bennett with genuine corporate humility. Meanwhile, Derek Foster begins his first day of mandatory sensitivity training, his expression transitioning from resentful defensiveness to reluctant recognition, as diversity consultant Maya Johnson systematically deconstructs discrimination patterns embedded within institutional practices. Most people don't intentionally choose discrimination, Maya explains with professional precision. They unconsciously adopt biased behavioral patterns embedded within operational systems designed without accountability checkpoints. This insight about systemic rather than individual responsibility creates cognitive opening for Derek's perspective transformation from personal defensiveness to institutional recognition. By understanding discrimination as systematic failure rather than personal accusation, resistant employees can participate in reform without defensive self-protection that typically blocks genuine learning. But how was I supposed to know she was important? Derek asks, still struggling with fundamental misconception that professional courtesy should depend on passenger status rather than universal application. His question reveals persistent misunderstanding that continues perpetuating discrimination throughout institutional environments worldwide. That's precisely the problem, Maya responds with educational clarity. The fundamental principle isn't recognizing important passengers who deserve respect. It's recognizing that every passenger deserves identical professional treatment regardless of their perceived importance or status. This philosophical shift, from selective courtesy based on perceived importance to universal dignity regardless of status, represents foundational transformation necessary for sustainable reform across service institutions globally. Derek's gradual comprehension of this principle demonstrates how individual perspective change accumulates into institutional transformation through educational intervention. In London, the United Nations Sustainable Aviation Council convenes its historical meeting while screens display real-time implementation data from airlines worldwide. Today marks unprecedented opportunity for global aviation transformation, announces Chairperson Mohammed Al-Farsi with diplomatic gravitas. Dr. Collins' intervention has created reform momentum that transcends traditional regulatory limitations through strategic leverage of documented discrimination. This international recognition demonstrates how strategic action by principled regulators can achieve systematic reform beyond conventional enforcement capabilities. By transforming personal humiliation into documented institutional accountability, Dr. Collins has created industry-wide transformation that traditional regulations couldn't achieve through conventional mechanisms. Our preliminary compliance data suggests 94% implementation among major international carriers, reports Deputy Chen during formal briefing. However, compliance metrics measuring operational outcomes rather than policy statements show only 47% effective implementation, suggesting significant gap between announced reforms and operational reality. This analytical precision reveals sophisticated regulatory understanding about implementation gaps between corporate policy statements and operational practices, how institutional transformation requires measured outcomes rather than documented intentions to achieve genuine reform. By distinguishing between announcement and implementation, effective regulation addresses substance rather than symbolism. At Sky Global's international terminal, operational transformation continues through technological innovation designed to prevent discriminatory incidents through automated feedback systems. The Dignity Verification Protocol uses artificial intelligence monitoring to identify potential discrimination patterns before they escalate into documented incidents, explains Technology Director Sophia Wang during implementation briefing. This preventative approach demonstrates evolutionary advancement from reactive crisis management to proactive pattern detection that identifies problematic behavioral trends before they develop into regulatory violations. By leveraging technology as accountability partner rather than enforcement mechanism, Sky Global establishes prevention systems that transform operational culture through continuous improvement rather than punitive intervention. Meanwhile, Elena Bennett launches comprehensive review of Sky Global's marketing materials, discovering disturbing disconnect between advertised values and operational practices throughout corporate communications. Our diversity campaign featuring My Testimonial promised universal respect, while our operational training emphasized security enforcement over passenger dignity. She acknowledges with corporate candor during executive assessment. This recognition about marketing reality disconnect represents critical self-awareness necessary for authentic institutional transformation. By acknowledging gap between advertised values and operational practices, Sky Global establishes foundation for integrity-based reform that aligns corporate identity with passenger experience through measurable accountability metrics. Back in London, Dr. Collins presents comprehensive regulatory framework designed to transform global aviation through verifiable accountability systems rather than aspirational policies. The International Dignity Protocol establishes measurable standards for non-discriminatory service throughout passenger interactions. Quote, she explains with diplomatic precision. Implementation verification through anonymous testing creates accountability beyond self-reported compliance metrics. This innovation in regulatory design demonstrates evolutionary advancement from traditional enforcement models to verifiable compliance systems that measure actual passenger experiences rather than institutional policy statements. By establishing accountability through outcome measurement rather than procedural documentation, effective regulation addresses behavioral reality rather than administrative fiction. 6 months later, Sky Global Airlines stands transformed beyond recognition. The international terminal where discrimination once flourished now features architectural designs that prioritize passenger dignity through private verification areas, professional training centers, and transparent feedback systems that display real-time customer experience metrics throughout public areas. Derek Foster works as diversity implementation specialist with regional carriers, his personal transformation from discrimination perpetrator to reform advocate representing redemptive potential within institutional change processes. I thought respect depended on passenger status, he explains to training participants. Now I understand that dignity represents universal human right, rather than conditional privilege based on perceived importance. His evolution from defensive resistance to educational advocacy demonstrates how effective intervention can transform individual perspectives through systemic understanding rather than personal accusation. By focusing on institutional patterns rather than individual blame, transformative education creates reform advocates from unlikely sources through perspective shift rather than punitive pressure. Meredith Wilson relocated to aviation consulting, her professional rehabilitation emerging through specialized expertise in transforming security protocols from enforcement models to service paradigms. My catastrophic error at Sky Global revealed fundamental misconception about passenger verification. She acknowledges during industry presentations, security and dignity aren't competing priorities but complementary necessities within effective aviation operations. Her professional redemption demonstrates restorative potential within accountability systems that focus on transformation rather than permanent punishment. By channeling painful experience into educational expertise, reformed perpetrators can contribute valuable perspective to institutional transformation through experiential wisdom rather than theoretical understanding. The Collins Protocol spreads across service industries like wildfire. Systematic bias detection, Real-time customer feedback and economic consequences for discrimination transform hospitality, healthcare, retail, and education environments worldwide. Dr. Collins. Methodical approach proves that the most effective response to prejudice isn't reactive confrontation, but strategic intelligence applied with surgical precision to institutional pressure points. Elena Bennett evolves from reluctant marketing spokesperson into powerful corporate advocate for authentic representation. Integrity requires operational alignment with advertised values, she explains during global business conferences. Institutional credibility emerges from measurable consistency between public promises and private practices, rather than aspirational marketing disconnected from customer experience. Her advocacy demonstrates how corporate authenticity creates competitive advantage through trust-based relationships rather than image-based marketing. By establishing verifiable connection between advertised values and operational realities, businesses build sustainable reputation through integrity rather than impression management. Mrs. Patel's live-stream documentation becomes civil rights template worldwide. Her real-time coverage demonstrates how smartphones transform private discrimination into public accountability, creating digital witnesses that demand institutional response. Your phone represents democracy's most powerful enforcement mechanism. She advises millions of followers who now document bias incidents with professional precision rather than emotional reaction. This technological democratization of accountability demonstrates how digital tools transform power dynamics between institutional authority and individual experience. By providing irrefutable documentation of discriminatory incidents, smartphone witnesses eliminate deniability that previously protected biased institutions from accountability through evidentiary disputes. The personal transformations prove most remarkable. Mr. Garrison, whose casual racism contributed to that toxic afternoon, now volunteers with international traveler assistance programs at major airports worldwide. Age doesn't excuse ignorance, he tells other seniors during training sessions. We're never too old to examine our assumptions and choose better behavior based on universal human dignity rather than conditional respect. His evolution from prejudiced passenger to educational advocate demonstrates transformative potential within bystander intervention programs that engage witnesses as active participants rather than passive observers during discriminatory incidents. By transforming silent witnesses into vocal advocates, effective intervention programs multiply accountability throughout institutional environments. The broader impact resonates through millions of everyday interactions where respect replaces prejudice, because employees remember the afternoon when discrimination met strategic intelligence and lost decisively. Every professional greeting, every dignified transaction, every equitable customer service moment represents victory over institutional bias that once seemed inevitable within global service environments. This story reveals timeless truths about power, patience, and moral mathematics. Strategic thinking defeats emotional reaction. Systematic solutions address systematic problems. Individual dignity requires institutional protection. Sometimes the most effective response to discrimination isn't raising your voice. It's raising the standard for everyone who follows through strategic intervention at institutional pressure points. Have you witnessed discrimination that went unchallenged? These stories create change by transforming private suffering into public accountability through strategic documentation rather than emotional reaction. Every system has rules that can work for everyone when we understand how to use them effectively through intelligent intervention rather than reactive confrontation. The most powerful response to discrimination isn't anger. It's intelligence applied with precision to create lasting change through systematic transformation rather than individual confrontation. The revolution continues with every documented incident, every strategic response, every transformation of bias into systematic change that makes discrimination economically unsustainable and dignity mathematically inevitable throughout global institutions. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.